The world owes $317 trillion. That number alone should stop everything. Because if debt is money owed, then someone somewhere must be getting paid, yet every major nation on earth is in debt. The United States, China, Japan, Europe, emerging markets, poor countries, rich countries, democracies. Authoritarian states, allies and enemies alike, everyone owes. So here's the paradox no one wants to ask out loud. If everyone owes money, who exactly is the creditor? The global system continues to function as if this makes sense. Governments operate, banks lend, markets trade, salaries are paid. Wars are funded, bailouts happen, and yet the total debt number keeps rising year after year without ever being meaningfully repaid. That contradiction is the starting point, because what most people think debt is wrong. When you hear $317 trillion in global debt, your brain automatically compares it to household debt. You imagine a borrower, a lender, a loan, and repayment. You imagine consequences, default, bankruptcy, and endpoint, but this is not what they teach you. Global debt does not work like personal debt. It was never designed to be paid off. It was designed to be rolled over, serviced, and expanded. That single design choice explains everything. The $317 trillion figure comes from combining government debt, corporate debt, household debt, and financial sector liabilities worldwide. According to data compiled by institutions like the Institute of International Finance, global debt crossed $300 trillion after 2021 and continues climbing. To put that in perspective, total global GDP is roughly $100 trillion. That means the world owes more than 3 times what it produces in an entire year. In any normal system, that would be impossible. In this system, it's required because repayment would collapse it. Here's what viewers think they know: debt is borrowed money, it must be paid back. Too much debt is dangerous. Eventually, someone must tighten their belt. That logic applies to households. It does not apply to sovereign monetary systems. Governments don't pay back debt the way you pay off a credit card. They refinance it, they roll it forward. Old debt is paid with new debt. Maturing bonds are replaced with new issuance. Interest is serviced, not eliminated. Debt becomes permanent. This is not accidental, it is structural. Look at the United States. Since 1971, when the dollar was fully detached from gold, the national debt has never meaningfully declined. Not after booms, not after busts, not after peace, not after war. It only resets relative to GDP through inflation or crisis. Victory does not reduce debt. Loss does not reduce debt. Growth does not eliminate it. Debt survives everything. Now ask the uncomfortable question. If governments are always borrowing, who are they borrowing from? At first glance, the answer seems simple. Governments owe bondholders, corporations owe banks, banks owe depositors. Central banks sit at the top, but when you follow the chain carefully, it starts looping back on itself. Governments owe other governments. China holds U.S. treasuries, Japan holds U.S. treasuries, Europe holds U.S. treasuries. Pension funds hold government bonds, central banks hold each other's debt. Corporations owe banks, banks package that debt into securities, those securities are bought by funds, those funds are backstopped by central banks, banks owe central banks create reserves, reserves are liabilities on central bank balance sheets. But unlike everyone else, central banks cannot run out of money in their own currency. So who do central banks owe? On paper, no one, which is where the illusion begins. This is not what they teach you. Money in the modern system is not primarily created by governments printing notes. It is created by banks issuing loans. When a bank makes a loan, it does not transfer existing money. It creates new money. A deposit appears in your account. A loan appears on the bank's books. Debt and money are born at the same moment. That means every dollar in circulation is someone's liability. Money is debt, and interest ensures there is always more debt than money. That single mechanism guarantees expansion. Because the principal can be created, the interest cannot unless new debt is issued. That forces perpetual borrowing just to keep the system functioning. This is why debt never disappears. When defaults happen, they don't destroy the system, they reset it. Losses are socialized, balance sheets are cleaned, new cycles begin. This is where the moral contradiction appears. Governments claim debt funds progress, schools, hospitals, infrastructure, stability, and sometimes it does. But the cost is not shared equally. Interest flows upward, asset holders benefit, wage earners service the system through inflation and taxation, help becomes extraction, allies become debtors, victory becomes obligation. This is not what they teach you. The real lender in the $317 trillion debt system is not a single country, bank, or institution. It is the structure itself. A structure that converts time, labor, and productivity into financial claims, claims that never fully resolve. And as long as confidence holds, the system survives. People believe bonds will be paid. They believe currencies will function tomorrow. They believe inflation will be managed. They believe central banks are in control. Belief is the collateral, but belief is fragile, and when it breaks, debt doesn't disappear, it chooses sides. In the next part, we'll go deeper into the hidden lender itself, how money is created, why interest guarantees permanent debt, and why defaults don't end the system, they feed it. Because once you see who actually gets paid, you'll understand why the debt keeps growing and why it can't stop. To understand who actually gets paid in a world drowning in debt, you have to abandon the idea that money is a fixed pool being passed around. That belief feels intuitive, it feels honest, and it is completely wrong. This is not what they teach you. Most people imagine lending as a transfer. Someone saves, someone else borrows, the saver gives up money, the borrower uses it. Later, the money comes back with interest. That logic applies in a gold-based system. It does not apply in a credit-based one. In today's system, money is created at the moment of lending. When a commercial bank approves a loan, whether to a government, corporation, or individual, it does not pull existing money from a vault. It creates new money by typing numbers into existence. The borrower receives a deposit. The bank records a loan, the money supply expands, no saver was required. This is why global debt can grow faster than global production, because debt does not depend on prior savings. It depends on confidence and collateral. Interest is where the trap closes. Every loan is issued with interest attached, but the interest is not created at the same time as the principal. That means system-wide there is always more debt owed than money available to repay it. This is not an oversight, it forces expansion. To pay interest, someone else must borrow. To service old debt, new debt must be issued. To prevent collapse, the system must grow or inflate. This is why governments never truly repay debt, they refinance it, bonds mature, new bonds are issued, old creditors are paid with newly created money. The cycle continues. And it only works as long as people believe future growth will cover past promises. Now look at the scale. As of the early 2020s, global government debt alone exceeds $90 trillion. Corporate debt is over $85 trillion. Household debt is near $60 trillion. Financial sector liabilities make up the rest. Together, they form a structure so large that even small changes in interest rates create massive stress. That's why central banks fear normalization. Higher rates mean higher servicing costs. Higher servicing costs mean budget crises. Budget crises mean defaults or money printing. And money printing undermines confidence. So central banks step in, they buy government bonds, they inject liquidity, they lower rates, they promise stability. This is called support. But here's the contradiction. If governments can create money, why do they borrow at all? This is not what they teach you. Governments borrow because debt creates discipline, or at least the appearance of it. Bond markets impose constraints. Ratings agencies enforce behavior. Central bank independence provides political cover. Debt shifts responsibility. If austerity is required, politicians blame markets. If cuts are imposed, governments cite creditors. If reforms are demanded, they point to institutions like the IMF or World Bank. Power is exercised through obligation. This becomes clearer when you look at international debt. Developing nations borrow in foreign currencies, often dollars. That means they cannot print their way out. When conditions change, interest rates rise, capital flows reverse, they face crises. Then come the rescue packages. Loans offered in exchange for policy changes. Currency devaluation, spending cuts, asset privatization, market liberalization, help arrives but with strings. This is not charity, it is control. This is why debt is one of the most effective tools of power ever created. It enforces compliance without armies. It extracts value without occupation. It reshapes economies quietly, legally, and permanently, and it always flows upward. Who actually gets paid? Bondholders, financial institutions, asset owners. Those closest to money creation. Who pays? Wage earners, taxpayers, future generations. Inflation becomes the silent tax. Purchasing power erodes. Savings lose value. Debt remains. This is not what they teach you. They teach you debt is neutral, that it funds growth, that it can be managed responsibly. What they don't teach you is that debt redistributes wealth by design. Interest payments flow to those who already have capital. Those without assets pay through rising costs and stagnant wages. Over time, the gap widens. Now consider central banks. Central banks are portrayed as neutral referees. Independent, technical, apolitical. In reality, they sit at the center of the debt web. They create reserves, they set rates. They decide which assets are acceptable. They act as lenders of last resort. They absorb losses no one else can. During crises, they expand balance sheets dramatically. After 2008, after 2020. Trillions created to stabilize markets. Losses are hidden, confidence is preserved, but balance sheets never return to normal. Each intervention becomes the new baseline. This is why the system hasn't collapsed yet. Debt doesn't kill systems immediately. It anesthetizes them, it delays consequences, it pushes costs into the future. But the future always arrives. In the next part, we'll examine why this system continues to function despite its contradictions, how confidence, inflation, and currency hierarchy hold it together, and what happens when those pillars weaken, because the real danger is not high debt. The real danger is the moment people stop believing it can be managed. At this stage, the question is no longer how the debt system works. The real question is why it hasn't collapsed, because on paper it should have many times over. Empires have fallen with far less debt. Currencies have collapsed with far fewer promises. And yet this system keeps going, expanding year after year, crisis after crisis, bailout after bailout. The reason is confidence, not wealth, not productivity, not even power, confidence. Debt systems don't survive on repayment. They survive on belief that repayment will happen someday, even if it never does. This is not what they teach you. Every government bond, every treasury bill, every sovereign loan is not backed by gold or assets. It is backed by trust. Trust that the issuer will remain solvent. Trust that the currency will retain value. Trust that future taxpayers will exist to service obligations they never agreed to. That trust is rolled over continuously. When a government bond matures, it is rarely paid off. It is refinanced. New bonds replace old ones. Interest is paid. Principal survives. The illusion of repayment is maintained. This is called rollover mechanics, and it is the hidden engine keeping $317 trillion alive. But rollover only works if buyers keep showing up. Why do they? Because there is a hierarchy in global money. Not all currencies are equal. The US dollar sits at the top. It is the global reserve currency. Oil is priced in it, trade is settled in it, debt is denominated in it. That gives the United States an advantage no other nation has ever enjoyed. It can borrow in its own currency and the world demands it. This allows debt levels that would destroy any other country. Japan is second in line. Europe follows, then come emerging markets, then the rest. The lower you are in the hierarchy, the more fragile your debt becomes. This is why crises are not evenly distributed. When confidence weakens, capital does not disappear, it moves upward, into reserve currencies. Into perceived safety, debt stress is exported. This is why inflation looks different depending on where you live. In reserve currency nations, inflation is delayed. In weaker currencies, it is immediate and brutal. This is not incompetence. It is design. Inflation is the system's pressure valve. It is how debt is repaid without repayment. When money loses value, debts become easier to service. Governments never announce this, they never call it repayment, but that's what it is, a silent transfer from savers to borrowers. From wages to assets, from the public to the system. This is why inflation is tolerated even when it hurts, because inflation preserves the debt structure, deflation would destroy it. Now look at history. In the 1920s, Germany faced unpayable war debts. The result was hyperinflation, currency collapsed, savings vanished. Debts were wiped out not honorably but effectively. After World War II, many countries emerged with massive debt loads. They didn't repay them. They inflated them away during decades of growth and currency debasement. In the 1970s, the US faced debt pressure, trade deficits, and gold outflows. The solution was not austerity. It was abandoning gold in 1971. The constraint was removed, debt expanded. Every time the system is threatened, the response is the same: change the rules, redefine money, reset expectations. This is not what they teach you. They teach debt is a number. In reality, it's a relationship. A relationship between those who issue promises and those who believe them. When belief holds, the system holds. When belief breaks, debt doesn't disappear, it explodes into crisis. That's when defaults happen, but defaults are not failures of the system, they are features. Defaults allow debts to be cleared selectively. Losses are imposed where they are politically acceptable. Bailouts protect systemic players. Smaller participants absorb the damage. This is why banks survive crises while households don't. This is why governments are rescued while currencies are sacrificed. This is why too big to fail exists. Debt is not moral, it is strategic. Now consider international institutions. The IMF and World Bank are presented as helpers, stabilizers, development partners, but their loans come with conditions, structural adjustments, spending cuts, currency reforms, market liberalization. Debt becomes leverage. Countries trade sovereignty for liquidity. This is modern financial colonialism, without flags, without soldiers, without occupation. Help versus extraction, that is the contradiction, and it explains why some nations never escape debt cycles. They are not meant to. Now bring it back to the original question. If everyone owes money, who is getting paid? The answer is not a single lender. The answer is the system itself. A system that rewards proximity to money creation. A system that transfers value upward through interest, inflation, and asset appreciation. a system that converts time into obligation. Debt is not meant to be repaid, it is meant to be serviced, and as long as servicing continues, the system survives, until it doesn't, because confidence is not infinite. When interest costs rise faster than growth, when inflation outpaces wages, when debt servicing crowds out governance. When people stop believing promises, the rollover fails. That is the moment history remembers. In the final part, we'll confront that moment. What happens when confidence finally breaks, who loses, who survives, and why the end of a debt cycle never looks like collapse until it's already too late. Because the most dangerous thing about $317 trillion in global debt is not the number, it's the belief holding it together. At some point, every debt system reaches a moment where belief weakens faster than control can compensate. It doesn't happen with a single announcement. There is no alarm. No official countdown. It begins quietly. Interest costs rise a little faster than expected, budgets tighten, central banks speak more carefully, language changes, temporary becomes permanent. Transitory disappears. This is how confidence breaks, not all at once, but unevenly. First, trust weakens at the edges. Emerging markets feel it first. Capital flows reverse. Currencies fall, inflation spikes, governments blame external shocks, then comes intervention, emergency loans, rescue packages, conditional support, debt is rolled again, but each rollover extracts more control. This is not what they teach you. They teach crises are accidents, black swans, mismanagement, corruption. But when you look across history, debt crises follow the same path. Too much leverage, too much confidence, too little margin for error. And when the system can no longer pretend, it chooses how to reset. There are only four outcomes: inflation, default, restructuring, currency collapse. Sometimes they arrive together. Inflation is the most politically acceptable. No vote required, no announcement needed. Debts shrink in real terms while prices rise. Savers pay, asset holders benefit. Governments claim growth. Default is more visible. Someone doesn't get paid, pensions are cut, bonds are restructured, trust evaporates, but defaults are selective, strategic. Designed to protect the core. Restructuring sounds polite. It's default with better language, longer maturities, lower interest, reduced principal. The loss is spread across time. Currency collapse is the final reset. The unit of account itself fails, savings vanish, contracts break. The system reboots under a new name. History is filled with these endings. Ancient Rome debased its currency until trust failed. Weimar Germany inflated until money became meaningless. Argentina defaulted repeatedly while restructuring promises. The British Empire lost reserve status after debt and war. None of these collapses were sudden to those paying attention. They were obvious. This is not what they teach you. They teach that modern systems are smarter, that central banks have better tools, that data prevents disaster, that policymakers are in control, but tools only work while belief holds, and belief is already under strain. Today, interest costs on government debt are rising globally. Aging populations reduce growth, productivity lags, political systems fracture under financial pressure. Central banks face a contradiction: fight inflation or protect debt markets. They cannot do both forever. If rates stay high, debt servicing becomes impossible. If rates fall, inflation returns. If money is printed, confidence erodes. If austerity is imposed, social stability cracks. Every option extracts a cost. The system is choosing time bought with debt, but time is not free. And this brings us back to the original paradox. If everyone owes money, who is getting paid? The answer is now clear. The creditor is not a nation, not a bank, not a group of elites. The creditor is the system itself, a system that converts human labor into financial obligation, that transforms future productivity into present promises, that rewards those closest to money creation and punishes those farthest from it. Debt is the mechanism. It keeps economies moving, it funds growth, it stabilizes politics until it doesn't, and when it fails, it does not fail evenly. Those with assets survive, those with debt are crushed. Those with power rewrite the rules. This is the final moral contradiction. Debt is sold as opportunity but functions as control. It is framed as help but operates as extraction. It is described as temporary but designed to be permanent. This is not what they teach you. They teach responsibility without revealing structure. They teach budgeting without explaining creation. They teach finance as math, not as power. Once you see the system clearly, the $317 trillion number stops being shocking. It becomes logical, because a system built on debt must expand debt to survive. Repayment would destroy it. Stability requires imbalance. Growth requires obligation.